Today I am building this solid wood HiFi rack. The entire rack frame is made of solid Kiaat wood. Kiaat is native to Africa and renowned for its strength and durability. It has extremely low shrinkage rates and is considered to be a very dimensionally stable wood and very easy to work with. It also has great bug and termite resistance. I am cutting pre-cut rough lumber on my table saw with a sharp blade, and it was completely unnecessary to plane it smooth due to the clean cuts I was getting. I have designed the rack to use only 30 by 30 mm wood pieces. This gives a very symmetrical and elegant feel to the rack and is the look I'm going for. The equipment shelves are 8 mm toughened glass and the top shelves are 18 mm birch plywood with solid Kiaat edging and veneer. But before I continue, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, you heard right, I'm using glass shelves for my HiFi equipment to rest on. Now, you can build these with wood shelves or plywood shelves, veneered like the top shelves I will be making. However, I chose the glass for its aesthetic appeal. It gives the rack a lighter look, but in reality the glass is rather heavy due to its thickness of 8 mm. It is even as dull sounding as the birch plywood when I tap on it with my knuckles. Some say that glass changes the sound of equipment, and even though I am not disputing this claim, I am not experiencing this in this particular case. I'm not going to go into a lyrical description of how the soundstage is deeper and the imaging better, but rather just say that my equipment now has a very stable and heavy rack to rest in and looks good at the same time, at least in my opinion. You may have your own opinion, and that's also fine with me. After having cut all the lumber to the 30 by 30 mm size, I cut the pieces I need to a rough length on the miter saw, and then use the disc sander with a guide set to 90 degrees to creep up on the final length for each piece, and in turn get a really square and clean end. Here are all the cut and dimension pieces laid out. There are only two lengths used in the build, which makes it a very simple and easy rack to build. I made my own tenon and mortise machine to use floating tenons with a few 3D printed parts and a trim router, which you will see me use a bit later, and here you can see me making the floating tenons to join all the rack pieces together. I can now mark out where all the mortises must be cut into the sides and the ends of the wood pieces. The end result is good, and I'm getting a good fit with all the pieces fitting perfectly flush and square. I start the glue up process with the front and back frames and then go over to glue those together with the supports that fit in between to form the final structure. You can also use dowels to build a structure if you do not have the ability to do mortise and floating tenon joints. There are many good dowel guides available that will help you to get accurate results. Of course, if you have a Festool domino machine, that will make easy work of this process. These corner guides are used to make sure that the frame is glued up square, and is just something I quickly made up from 18 mm birch plywood and a few 50 mm holes cut into them to allow me to clamp them down. I cut these 8 pieces to fit into the top corners of the rack. These will provide some structure but are ready for supporting the wood shelves that will sit on top of the rack. In between these and the wood shelves will be some audiophile half rounds that will act as absorbers for the shelves to help eliminate vibrations. The glass shelves will be supported with 5mm metal pins, and this Craig jig makes it very easy to drill the holes at accurate intervals and depth to allow for flexible adjustment of the shelves. These strips of wood glued to the back of the rack will provide some form of structure to the rack, but will also function as a backstop for the glass shelves. I want to integrate some form of cable management into the rack and came up with an idea to fix a few thin strips of wood on dowel standoffs to the back of the rack, to which I can then tie cables with Velcro straps. I have no idea how well this will work, but hope that it does help with managing the multiple of cables that will be coming out from the back of the equipment. The finish that I'm applying is a Danish oil called Winkswood. It is manufactured locally here in South Africa by a French polisher called Brandon Winks. It contains some special ingredients that prevents it drying to a gloss finish. It is a simple wipe or brush on finish and then wiped off after application. I apply at least 2 or 3 coats for a wonderful lustrous finish. I will leave a link to this in the description below. These are the Zorbothane half rounds that I referred to earlier and will support the top wooden shelves. The wood shelves are 18mm birch plywood with 3mm strips of solid Kiaat edging. After applying the edging with wood glue and trimming it with a trim router, I veneer the top surface so that it looks almost like a single piece of wood. This black silicone tube slips over the 5mm metal shelf pins and helps reduce vibrations and prevents the glass shelf from moving on the metal pins. After placing the equipment and plugging in all the wires, the attempt at wire management is partially successful. I think I can still shorten some of the power cables, and the speaker wires of the home theater system still needs some tidying up. But with this many wires, there's only so much you can do. At least from the front it looks neat, and that is for me what was the point. The rack on its own is very heavy, mostly due to the weight of the 8mm glass shelves. It supports the equipment very securely, and the glass shelves do not move on the silicone tubes on the metal pins. Sound-wise, I can definitely hear a difference from my previous setup. With some tracks I could hear a wider soundstage beyond the speakers themselves, which was more narrow before. I thought differences would be subtle, but that was actually the biggest change I could hear, and it was quite noticeable. It could be that this rack is much smaller than the previous one and creates a bit more space between the speakers to perform better. The open structure of the rack probably also allows for better diffusion of sound, which will always help to create a better soundstage. I do not feel that the glass shells are adding any brittleness to the sound at all, and overall I am very happy with the build from a visual and sound perspective. Thank you all for watching. Also check out the behind the scene content on my Patreon and YouTube membership pages. Links are in the description below. I am currently working on an interesting project that you can follow along with my design and build process in a bit more detail. Then also check out my website at soundblab.net, where you will find build plans for sale for many of my loudspeaker projects. Thanks again, and until next time, adios.